Hey everybody. I got a few things going on in the fish room here this week, so I thought we'd take another trip around the world and try to get caught up on everything before I get too far ahead of myself. So, if you've been following along, you know I've been having a lot of issues with my angelfish here lately. If you have not been following along, I did a little series of videos about my angelfish and the aggression I was having. The long and short of it was this angelfish here in the middle, the large one, became really aggressive, particularly with this medium-sized one in the back. Like really aggressive, and it happened overnight. And so the long and short of it is I wound up moving this angelfish over to my 55-gallon angelfish tank, which we will be seeing here shortly. And I swapped one of the fish that was in that tank over with this tank, and it was just a disaster all the way around. Nobody got along with anybody, fights ensued, so on and so forth, and by the end of a very hectic evening, everybody was back where they started. I know I released the videos over a series of several days, but all of that happened within about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So, however it worked out that this one's aggression level went way down over the next couple of days. I've done this before with this fish in particular. In fact, that's why I did what I did. I've done this before, and I'm not really sure where the aggression comes from suddenly like that, and I'm not really sure why switching it around, even briefly as I do, makes any kind of a difference. I would understand if I put it in a new environment and then rearrange the environment here, and it, when it came back, it didn't necessarily feel like it was its own home territory. It was never away from this tank long enough for it to not feel like it was just back in its home territory, yet the aggression would subside. So, don't really know why, but I know it works. I've done it before. It's a hassle, but with angelfish, sometimes you just have to deal with that. They can be pretty aggressive. They are cichlids. Now, the way they're eyeing this filter intake there, I'm almost suspecting that some breeding behavior might be on the way. So, we'll see what happens with that. Stay tuned for any updates. I'll let you know what happens. Anyway, moving along to my gourami tank. Nothing really specifically going on in this tank this week, except I have noticed an absolute explosion in growth. And I think that might have to do with me beginning to use Flourish by Seachem, trace mineral supplement that is a liquid additive you pour in the tank. I'll shoot a video about it and I'll talk about it specifically here in the very near future, but for this video's sake, I have been dosing my tanks for the last couple of weeks just to see if I noticed any kind of difference. I wonder whether or not this water sprite is undergoing some sort of nutrient deficiency, which is causing it to grow in an odd sort of manner like that. So we're going to try feeding the tank and seeing if that doesn't make a difference. But in the meantime, the tank has just gotten downright lush. The red tiger lotus here has gone crazy. I've got two more runners that are looking for the surface. That small one there, you can see another small one developing right there, but by tomorrow morning that'll be at the surface. That thing will grow 3 inches overnight. So this plant is taken off. I've also removed two of those runners over the last 3 or 4 days. My temple plant in there looks nice and lush and green. I'm seeing lots of new growth coming out on that too. So I'm definitely seeing an impact since I've been putting the trace minerals in there, which is unusual because, well, maybe not unusual, but I wasn't expecting it. These plants are actually rooted into planted substrate, so they get all of the trace minerals they need. I suppose adding extra is not going to hurt or slow their growth, but they shouldn't be suffering. It would be these plants here that are attached to the rocks and are not rooted into the substrate that I would think would be more concern of needing the trace elements, and of course they are flourishing as well, so maybe everybody is just doing better since I'm putting it in there. Any way you slice it, they look really good. We're going to be keeping our eye on that, and I'm doing it in all of my tanks, so my angelfish tank here is equally as lush. Now, we're not going to be able to get right up on the tank because I got a bunch of stuff in the middle of the room. I really do need to get in here and get some work done, but it's not going to happen tonight. So this tank is the other one that was in question, and in fact, this fish here is the one that got swapped over. This is my German blue. I know he's hard to see because he's going to just face the camera the whole time, but this is a German blue angelfish. He's a gorgeous, gorgeous angelfish. I love him. I've had him for several years now, and he did not like the new angelfish coming over here into his tank. Well, technically, I guess it's his tank, but some of it is his, and he was not happy with that other angelfish in it, whether or no. And so I moved him over to the 29, and he wasn't doing real well over there. Within maybe half an hour, he was beginning to show signs of aggression towards the smaller angelfish that are in that tank. And so, as I said, everybody kind of went back and wound up right where they started an hour or so earlier. Other than that, I've got really nothing going on in this tank. I will show you how gross and filthy and disgusting it is. I really, really need to get in here, get some work done on it. I've really been slacking over this last week. I've been busy doing some stuff, but I've been really neglecting others. I still need to get to my filters that are all falling apart on the inside. So I got lots of stuff going on. So that's why I always say you should be subscribed. That way you won't miss anything, whatever I'm doing. You never really know. Nubius is doing fantastic in here. I am going to get in here pretty soon and thin this mob out. That's more water sprite. I do love my water sprite, but it grows like mad, especially when you start dosing the tank with trace minerals. So we'll have to get in there, thin that out. I might do some cyanobacteria treatment on this tank, but I think we're going to wait until I do a little more of the substrate removal. If you don't follow along or you're not familiar with my plans for this tank, I am going to try to get all that white substrate out of there, and I'm working on it little by little here and there. I'm in no hurry to get it done. It's just one of those projects that's going to sort of happen over time. So again, another good reason to be subscribed. You'll get to see this tank someday with a nice rich dark substrate in it like all my other tanks. Speaking of my other tanks, my Black Ghost knifefish tank, I just started doing a cyanobacteria treatment on this tank this morning. So we're not going to talk a lot about this one. I did shoot a video about it today. I just released it a little while ago, in fact. No biggie. I just did a water change. I physically removed as much of the cyanobacteria as I could with a siphon and a gravel vac, and then I began the treatment. The treatment involves dissolving a little bit of powder into the appropriate amount of water and making sure you've got good, vigorous gas exchange by having an air stone and good surface agitation, etc. We'll give it a few days. We'll do a water change. I'm going to run a second treatment on it just because it's a really bad infestation of the cyanobacteria. And after 2 treatments, I think we'll be good to go, and I should finally get that out of this tank. So we're not going to dwell too much on this tank because I got nothing else really going on in here. Black Ghost knifefish is still very reclusive. I see his tail. I see him, just before bedtime. He'll zip from one cave to the other and, dart and dash around the tank. But he has never been an outgoing fish, and I don't really suspect he ever will be. So, moving along to my native tank. Did a water change on this tank this week. I wiped the glass down so it's nice and clear. It was getting kind of green and rough. This tank still has a lot of algal growth in it. I may have some cyanobacteria growing in it. I'm sure I probably do, but at this point it's not that big of a deal. And while I initially had planned on doing that cyanobacteria treatment to this tank, I opted to do it to the tank we were just looking at, and my pea puffer tank I've got upstairs in my office has cyanobacteria in it, so before it gets out of control in that tank, I am going to clear it out with the treatment as well, and I've already shot some video of that if you want to check it out. So with this tank, during the water change, I threw away a bunch of the plants that had once again been torn loose from the gravel. The crayfish in there is, well, it's crayfish. If you've got experience with crayfish, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't have experience with crayfish, they are little construction workers, and they dig and burrow and move stuff around, and they chop things and pinch things and carry stuff. Fascinating animals, fun to watch. As far as I'm concerned, it's a small price to pay to have such an interesting animal in the tank. I don't mind the damage it does. In fact, when I set this tank up, I positioned the rocks in such a way, I'm not going to go into it now, but I did position the rocks in such a way that I was anticipating very destructive little crayfish in here, digging and burrowing and shifting stuff around. So we've got a nice stable tank and nothing is going to move. Plants, however, another story. If you want to look down here, you can see that jungle valve's been uprooted and pulled out. I'm assuming it's either the crayfish just digging and burrowing around it, or actually grabbing it, itself, grabbing the valve itself and pulling on it while it munched away or something. But again, it's tough to have a planted tank with a crayfish in it, even the one single crayfish in this whole tank, and I still lose lots and lots of vegetation all the time. I just cleaned all the floating vegetation out of this tank 2 days ago, and I've got more up there now. So it's unlikely that much of this will last, but we'll see. I'll keep working on it. I guess pretty soon I'll be worrying about trying to get those other fish, those two invasives you can see. The Mayan cichlid down there at the bottom. A friend of mine wants that, so I'm probably going to get that out of there and give that to him. The tilapia, I will probably just take down my local fish store, and right there next to the tilapia is that little mud sunfish. I still haven't heard back from the Department of Natural Resources. I did send someone there some photos so they could positively identify the fish, and they said they would take it, but I never heard back from them after I sent them the photos to identify it. So I'm not 100% positive yet on the ID, and I still am not really sure what I'm doing about that one. So again, no hurry. I will figure something out, and of course you will get caught up on it when I do, and you won't miss any, what's going on with that fish. So moving along, my snail tank is just doing its thing, ticking over. I've still got some shrimp in there. I hope the shrimp at some point will lay eggs or have babies or whatever, and I will get a bunch more shrimp. So I've got a few shrimp in there that I'm leaving alone, and that's where they're going to stay for the time being. And then of course the snails get picked out as I need them for food for my various puffers. My gudgeon and T-bar tank, did a water change and a tank, glass cleaning and all that, no big deal, nothing worth really even talking about. I didn't shoot any video of it or anything. The plants in this tank still look pretty crappy, so I don't really know what I'm ever going to do with them. If by now you haven't figured it out, I'm never usually in any really big hurry. I get around to stuff when I get around to it. If I don't really feel like doing it and it feels like it's a chore to me, then I don't do it because it's not fun. I know that sounds kind of silly, but this is my hobby. I'm supposed to be enjoying this. Now, having said that, I have my tanks set up so that if I don't feel like doing a water change today, even though it probably needs it, it can roll over for a few more days until I feel like doing it or getting around to it, and nobody in there is going to suffer. I do take pretty good care of my animals, I like to think. So that's all part of how I set everything up, is, with the understanding that I get to stuff when I get to it. And in this particular case, all we're really talking about is how scraggly these plants look. You can see the temple plant, most of the lower portions of them have lost all of their leaves. This one is planted pretty well. That actually got reburied. You can see my T-bar likes to dig. So that got buried up to its neck, and then suddenly it started growing really lush and beautiful again. So I'd imagine there's a good healthy root system under there. That one's the same way. It looks like a lollipop. There's no branches on it, but the top looks nice and lush. And so on and so forth. So they all, aren't really hurting anything. I just have to get in there and remove a bunch of dead leaves that wind up floating to the surface. But I'm in there at least once a day feeding the tank anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Again, worst that's going to happen is they'll just sort of die off, and eventually I'll pull the plants out and we'll figure out something else to do. That T-bar is just such a digger. I don't really know what I'm going to do. I might have to end up going a different route altogether and putting a little bit of driftwood in here, maybe tying some Anubias or Java to the driftwood. I might just put a bunch of Anubias in the rocks and put it in there firmly enough that that T-bar right there cannot actually rip it up or tear it out. So we'll see. This tank's a work in progress, as always. It's just going to kind of do its thing until I get around to doing something else with it. It's just a cool tank with some really cool fish in it. Nothing really special other than that. So moving along, my 125, which likewise we're not going to get to see the whole tank in one go because I'm not going to wind up standing across the room. Nothing really going on in this tank that I can think of either. I did just get a little bit of video the other day of my chocolate zebra, I will call them plecos, just for ease. They are L270s, and they are actually an ancestress species, but for the most part they just get referred to as chocolate zebra plecos. And I've also got another little ancestress species in here, which is my, speaking of the devil, there's one of my chocolate zebras right there. I also have a bristlenose, a long fin bristlenose in here, which often gets called a bristlenose pleco, but is not actually a plecostomus species. It is an ancestress species. But again, I don't think anybody's going to be too upset with you if you just call it a bristlenose pleco, or in this case, a chocolate zebra pleco. I feel like I'm having a repeat of the video I just shot the other day. That, of course, is my Tenopoma acutirostra. It goes by many, many names. I've heard leopard gourami, bush gourami, climbing perch. I bought it under the name African spotted leaf fish. It is not a true leaf fish, but it is an awesome fish. I love that guy. If you will look closely down here, you will see another one of my chocolate zebras. I have 3 of them and 1 of the long fin bristlenose. That is my Synodontis eupteris, or African featherfin squeaker. Another really awesome thing. Well, that was the first time that's ever happened before. My phone actually shut off because it was overheating. I had it plugged in before I began the video, and I guess after 15 minutes of shooting video, in addition to charging it up, it overheated. So definitely disrupted my flow there. But we will continue on now. I was more or less done with this tank anyway. Nothing really going on in here. No, I just did realize there is one more thing going on in here. If you will see this piece of water wisteria right there, that is the piece that broke loose. If you'll remember, not long ago I said I had planted 2 new stalks in this tank. One is right there, and the other one had broken loose from the substrate and was floating around. Well, the other day I pulled it down from the surface and I saw a patch of new growth on it, and so I tucked the original end into the ground where the roots were beginning to develop, and that is the same as that. I had someone ask me the other day what it was because it didn't look like water wisteria to them. And the reason it looks different is because it looks different growing in the water versus out of the water. And where I bought them, from the big chain pet store that I got these fish at, they come in little plastic sleeves with moist roots, but it is growing in the atmospheric air. It's not growing in the water. And you get that leaf pattern that looks like that. It's a completely different structured plant than when it grows submergent. So now that it's been in the water long enough for new growth to come out, that's what the new growth looks like. So I will be getting a lot of water wisteria growing up in this tank. So that is one thing worth noting. Moving on to my brackish tank. Not a ton going on in here either. The one thing I did do recently, you will notice there's a power head in the back bottom corner. I wound up finding out that there was a lot of dead water space back there, and I was getting a lot of detritus buildup. Some of the shrimp that I was putting in there, the freeze-dried krill, was getting saturated and sinking and falling into the back of the tank. I was unaware of it, and I wound up having issues with my nitrogen cycle. So I added the power head. I got plenty of circulation now. It moves the water on the bottom around so that I'm not getting any dead zones. And my only real concern was that Butterbean here, my puffer, wasn't getting too jostled around. He's not a fish that likes a lot of current in the tank, and you can kind of tell by the way the Java's moving around that there's some water flow in there now. It's not a calm, still tank. But I have not seen any signs yet of him seeming distressed or anything else. And actually, when you look down, you can see the way the current has blown the gravel up. It's created a little berm back there that deflects the water flow. So he still has his little cave to go into that doesn't have a lot of water flow in it. So I'm happy with the results of this. It doesn't seem like he's too stressed out, and it's helping me keep the tank a lot cleaner and healthier for everybody in there anyway. So good for that, and maybe we will work on getting some more Java back in here soon. The stuff that was in there was not doing well. This stuff has. Anything that wasn't doing well, I've removed. All of the stuff that looks like it's doing okay is still in there. And then, of course, I did float some water Sprite, so we've got that in there planted too. My quarantine tank is still just ticking over. I haven't done anything with this other than wipe the glass down and do a water change. The fish are still in there. I've got one cherry barb. I've got a bunch of Rasbora hets. And then I have some pregnant female guppies in there. Well, I guess I don't really have to clarify that they're female. I have some pregnant guppies in there, not the male guppies. And I'm just kind of waiting to see what happens. I'll get around to getting the barbs and everything out of there at some point. They're certainly ready to go into their new homes now. They've been in there for weeks and weeks, and they show no signs of any kind of illness. They're all fat and healthy. In fact, one of the Rasboras actually looks like it might be pregnant, or gravid rather, not pregnant. I don't think Rasboras are live bearers. This one back here looks really, really fat, so I'm not sure what's going on with that one. So they're ready for their home whenever I get around to doing it, but as I was saying earlier, you know, I get around to doing things whenever I feel like it, and I seldom even think about this tank, honestly, except when I do these videos and when I feed it once a day. So we'll do something with that soon. Last, but certainly not least, is my new red-clawed crab tank. It's still new enough that pretty much everything in this tank is fairly new. I did just shoot a video earlier and did an update on that, so I will keep this brief too. If you really want to look at this tank or whatever, you can check out the red-clawed crab tank playlist. That's a mouthful. And you can look at the 5 or 6 videos that are on there, and you can see how I set it up and what's going on. But real briefly, I've added some more crabs. I'm trying to get the crab population up so that there's quite a few in there, and we can see them crawling all around all over the place. I can see a few right now. You got the one right there that's fairly obvious, but you got another one right hiding in there that's not so obvious. Of course, you've got this one right here. I don't know why this phone doesn't want to focus. And you'll see them sticking up here and there when I come in and turn the lights on in the morning. They're all over the place on the moss and climbing up on the rocks and everything. So we're getting there. I do want to bolster the population a little more. I am working on trying to get this creeping Jenny to lie down and grow across the surface of the water rather than up towards the lights. I did put new lights on this tank recently, so it's got a pair of T5s now instead of a single T8, so it's much, much more intensely lit. So again, plenty going on. This tank is still fairly new and still fairly much under construction, so if you really want to get the lowdown on the whole thing, you need to go check out the playlist, and you can see all the videos and see everything I've done on it. So that brings us all the way back to where we started. Completes our trip around the world. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Sorry it was so long, but like I said, I got a lot going on. Make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss any of it. Thanks again for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.